So, gamers, let's talk. Now, the London Grand Tournament, the largest event in the UK, arguably, technically. I think
it's either this or Coventry, but it's called run by the same people, right?
Yeah. So the group that runs the LGT are running the LGT, the London Grand Tournament, in September. And a couple of weeks ago, they released a rules pack, which essentially, fairly standard. We've been doing a lot about rules packs recently. We did one about the US Open, which has gone down really well, I should say. Really well. But the London Grand Tournament released a pack a couple months ago. And they had some terrain layouts, which were questionable at best for some of the layouts, because I think it had been done digitally rather than physically. I don't think they'd actually tested them. I think they just looked at where the terrain was going to go and thought that looks all right and then put it out, which is fair enough. Sometimes you do have to do that. And mostly it was okay. There were a couple of issues where things couldn't quite fit through gaps, such as dreadnoughts not being able to go through between two buildings.
To be fair, I mean, the Telemont, which is what was used as the example in that photo,
he's on a big
does have
base.
100 mil base. And there are some places, even as a night player, there's some places look like you shouldn't always be able to get everywhere. I totally understand that.
Yeah, for sure.
Most normal stuff could have fit between that gap down the building. So
yeah, I think someone worked out that if on certain maps, if you deployed knights behind the buildings, you couldn't get out.
Oh yeah. Which that was dumb. Which was an issue. But today, the LGT 40K GT Gaming Pack version 2.0 has been released. Interestingly, there's actually more terrain on it. So everyone who bought a TT Combat set to practice LGT will have to get their credit cards out again because you need a bit more. Now to be fair to them, they
good and bad.
Did say that.
Yeah.
They did mention there's going to be another couple of bits of terrain. But you will be able to buy these separately. It's something.
At least it's not a complete waste of time. Yeah, it's not a complete waste of money.
The amount, the amount they're adding on is 2 ruins.
Yeah,
and so I think the main pack is something like 40 quid.
It's more like 80.
Yeah. Oh, maybe it was 40 quid. They did you could buy half of it, couldn't you? You could double that for the main
2
thing.
halves.
Yeah. So I'm guessing maybe a tenner for these 2 buildings. But there is something different about these buildings as well, which we'll talk about more in a minute, I'm sure.
You wanted to talk about the dice, right? There's an interesting caveat about dice. Let's have a look.
Right, so in the pack, there is a section that says dice rolling apps is not allowed. That's fine.
Makes sense.
I think it's really got an issue with that. But then there's a bit underneath it, using your opponent's dice. It says, please note that in the interest of fairness, all dice used in a game may be rolled by either player. You are not permitted to refuse your opponent if they ask to use some of the dice you are using and vice versa. If you do not wish to share dice due to COVID-related concerns, please purchase a set of official dice to use at the event. My first thought is, I don't want anyone touching my stuff. I don't care pre-COVID. At all.
Yeah.
You're going to roll my dice? Sure. I'd rather you asked first, But that's what they said here, ask. But post-COVID? No, please don't touch my models, my tape measure, my dice. Ideally, don't touch my objectives. Please try and keep your hands off the terrain, if possible, because the whole contact transmission is a thing. And so having somebody in an official capacity here say, if someone says, I want to use your dice, you have to let them. And my assumption is, if you don't, you'll probably be yellow carded. And there's some quite good things about yellow cards further up in the pack, actually. I think that's really, really dumb. I think that's terribly short-sighted by the people that are organising the event. And the caveat they've put in, which is, if you don't want your opponent to do that, please purchase a set of official dice to use at the event. Are these official dice somehow COVID free?
Yeah, I think this is probably worded a little bit badly. The reason this is is because if people are using custom dice, obviously we both use custom dice all the time. If someone considers your dice to be dodgy, cooked, weighted, whatever, I think the intention here is to be like, hey, I should be able to roll your dice because they're rolling sixes all the time, and it's just maybe it's because they're cooked, maybe it's because you're just really lucky. I think they've just worded the last line badly. It says, if you don't wish to share dice due to COVID, please use official dice at the event. I think what this means is that if you don't want to share your dice, you have to use the, let's say, tournament sanctioned dice, but then not share them either. Because if you have to share them either way, that doesn't make sense. Because why would you purchase an extra set of dice if you don't want to share dice?
That's right.
So I think the idea behind this line is to say that, like, if you don't want people touching your dice, use an official set, because then they're definitely not rigged because you've only just bought them.
Yeah.
Do you read it that way, or am I reading it daft?
I think that's the only way of reading that.
In the logical sense, I think.
Puts them in a good light. Yeah, I mean, I'd say logical. But to me, it just sounds a little bit like, well, we don't really want to rule it any other way. And so we're just going to rule it this way. Which means that for me, I'm meant to be at an event this weekend, and I've decided to not go to this event because the restrictions on COVID haven't been relaxed any further. And I think the people that are running the event are actually doing so. I'm guessing the word is illegally, but I don't think that's the right word to use.
I mean, it's
so
I guess. I don't think it has to be guessed, though. I think it's an educated assumption.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just the way the word illegal is the correct word is all I'm saying. They're running it in a way that I don't think is correct, and they're certainly running it in a way that I don't think is safe. And so I'm not going. And so now I'm thinking, well, because I care about my own personal safety, to just maybe a small degree at least, do I now go to the LGT and go, you know what, I need 20 dice for my army because I'm playing knights, that's all I need. I just go there and buy some dice so that my opponent can't touch my dice. Do I have to do that? Is it almost an extra cost for someone that just wants to be a little bit more certain that they're not coming into contact? Sounds a bit weird.
It is a bit
Don't
weird.
Like it.
I think pre-COVID it's fine, but post-COVID, like,
pre-COVID, not a fuck given at all.
Look, let's be honest. I've been vaccinated. I'm sure you have, JR. You're about to be.
Yeah.
Everyone hopefully will be vaccinated at the time, but it's still going to be a concern. Like,
the vaccine's only 70% effective anyway.
Yeah, the spread of germs is still a major concern. Everyone's basically just hyper aware of it now. Like, everyone spread germs before. It's just like, oh my god, we don't actually do it this time. We don't do it more. You know, I love not having a cold.
Most of those germs weren't potentially fatal, but
yes, yeah,
they were still
there.
Them. You're absolutely correct.
You still don't want them, do you? And I don't think anyone will want them. And imagine at this point, I don't know, but imagine masks will still be a thing in September. I imagine.
Potentially.
Yeah. They don't want them to be, but who knows? They change their mind.
No, I know they don't want them to be. But...
So yeah, it seems a bit dodgy. I think, again, if they said, like, oh, purchase an official pack and then share them anyway, it'd just be like, why is this line a thing? You know?
Yeah.
It's like you either share your dice so you don't play, but if that's the way it's going to be, which is stupid.
I know. And for me, part of going to a tournament is the prep work that goes into it. You paint your army. They've said in the pack, if you could bring something that's not painted, it's coming off the table, so just paint it. You pack your bags. You make sure you've got codex, your cards, if you're using them. You've got all of the things that you need to play the game, including objectives, tape measure, and of course, dice. If you've rocked up and gone, you know what? I've only brought half my dice. I've got to play my entire army, and I've got 10 dice, and that's not enough to make things quick and easy, and I'm going to end up clocking out. Isn't that on you, the player, to go and buy some more dice at the event and go, yeah, I forgot some dice, I'll have to buy some. Guess I'm not having a beer today.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Eat the cost, however it is.
Yeah.
So I don't love this, and I think it
needs to be worded so much better.
It's just a little bit of a sensitive subject at the moment, which is why I want to bring it up.
Yeah, it's definitely something to be aware of if you are attending the event. And again, it might get updated. I think it could, again, as you said, it could be handled a lot better. But here we are. Yeah. We're the original 40k show. This is what we do. We bring things. We talk about it. I have no bearing on this subject. It's just something we've seen. So okay, right then. Let's have a look at the terrain. The terrain and the missions.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So terrain and missions. The terrain for your games will be on each table for you to arrange in accordance with the map below. All terrain rules will be played as per the rules for terrain in the match play section of the rulebook. A lot of this is just fairly derivative. It's like, don't be a, one of them. Don't be one of them. Don't like that. But we have, what is it, 4 types of terrain? Yeah, 4 types of terrain.
Before you scroll down, there's a thing here I really like. It says, these maps have been designed to allow for the most common army builds and cannot simultaneously cater to very unusual lists while still being balanced for the vast majority of common tournament army archetypes. As such, while common large models like Imperial Knights are able to negotiate their way through most gaps in the terrain on these boards, an army of Stompers or Baneblades may struggle. So
That's interesting.
If you decided to take triple Baneblade for whatever reason, welcome back to 2018. We loved having you here.
It's terrible. Stop.
You might not get around the board too much with that.
No.
So I think they've, and having looked at the maps, I think they've tried to get a kind of happy medium of there's enough terrain to play the game.
Yeah.
But it might impact you if all you have is these massive, like, dinner plate sized models to run around with.
If you're using a weird army, it might be an issue. So, which is, I think it's nice for them to caveat that, because if someone is planning on taking like a double Stomper list, which fair play. I mean, by then the cadets might be out. Pray for Stomper, you know. If
ask for less terrain on the bottom 10 tables of the 400 or whatever are going to be there, you'll be okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's nice that they've mentioned it. At least you can kind of like mentally prepare if you're running a weird list. But if you're running like a pretty common list or a fairly, let's say, standard battle forged list, as Games Workshop put it, you'll probably be all right. Let's talk about the terrain. There are 4 terrain pieces. One of them is new. Okay, so we have the large L shape, which is a base size of 20 centimeters squared. And 2 line of sight blocking walls faces that are also 20 centimeters. It has 3 levels, and they are played using the ruins rule from the rulebook. So this is the piece we're talking about, this one in particular. Now, it's essentially a cuboid. It's a cube, sorry. So behind here, there's like, you can't actually see it because there's no top-down view, but there's like a big square for a base, right?
Yeah.
There's also 20
the same length as the walls on the sides there. So it literally just is a box.
Yeah, exactly. So this is going to be used as a ruin, which makes sense. But in the old pack, it wasn't treated as totally a ruin. It was a ruin without obscuring.
I was really, really happy about.
I'm sure you were. And it made the most sense because of the fact that... here we go. I've got another picture. So this is what it looks like on the inside. So we have a big square here, which is great because you know if you're in or out of the terrain, right?
Yeah.
However,
absolutely.
Beforehand, the only reason this is block line of sight is because it's really tall, which is great. But now because it's obscuring, this square, the base, will also block line of sight for anything that's less than 18 wounds, and will not block line of sight for anything with more than 18 wounds.
Yeah. I don't know how many of you in the chat have played games using this terrain. Most of you probably have, because this is like the sort of standard terrain pack that a lot of shops buy because it's cheap. You get a full table's worth, I think it was 70 quid odd, you know, and you could get a passable tournament pack of terrain out of it. That base is massive.
It's huge. It's 20. It's the same size as the tall of building. Yeah. 20 centimeters. So, hi Elliot, how's it going?
It's very difficult to maneuver around that and get lines of sight because the amount of distance you have to move and the amount of angles it kind of shuts down on you.
Yeah.
So even people that aren't playing knights like me, and obviously I'm not your favorite and I'm at a disadvantage because of it, and I know I'm biased at that point, 100%. But even if you're not playing armies like mine, there's still a lot of movement you've got to do to get line of sight.
Yeah.
If you're trying to shoot something, it makes quite a large impact on the games. This is not a small change to the rules pack at all.
No, it's huge. It's just a big block, essentially, you know, just existing. And there's 2 of these on every board, you know. But this is the same for all of the other ruins. The other ones make more sense. But it's just this one's interesting.
We'll actually have obscuring, because obscuring, whilst that keyword, that terrain keyword, is on every single ruin, it only applies to your ruin if your ruin is 5 inches or more in height, and this is because GW's ruins. I don't have one to hand.
Yeah.
They're 5-inch from the ground to the top of the first floor.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well,
so
the medium one the new one is 15 centimeters tall, so that'll be obscuring, but it doesn't have a huge base. Yeah, it doesn't have a huge base. So let's have a look at it. So the medium L shapes, it's 4 centimeters wide. The wall is 4 mil wide and is centered down the middle of the base. The wall is 15 centimeters high and has apertures through it, so it does not naturally block line of sight.
Yeah.
So this is going to be like essentially like a perforated, or something where you can actually see through, but it will have obscuring, so knights can't see through it, but other things can. At nights, but they can't see each other if they're not in it. So this is a new one, which will be really interesting because this hasn't been released. Like the physical product hasn't been released yet.
That's right.
So it's gonna be interesting what this one looks like.
I kind of expected it to be shown today because why would you not? Here's the one time where everyone's going to be looking at this rules pack apart from at the event itself, so it makes sense to show that. The interesting thing about this though is out of all of the terrain that you get in this TT Combat set, the only piece of terrain that has a base that surrounds the entirety of it is these ruins. So you can stand against the terrain looking at your opponent in full view and still get cover.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting.
Yeah, because the rest are essentially 8th edition terrain, where it's like if you're in it, cover safe, but you can only physically see them if you can physically see them. There's no windows or anything.
Yeah,
so
that's right. And there's no touching walls for counters in terrain now.
No, exactly.
So you've got to be in a position where you're vulnerable and you'll be out of cover.
Yeah,
because the way everything is built solid, right?
Yeah.
So it's a funny one, different.
So then there's a small L, which is this one. These ones, these are only like 3 inches high, so these don't get obscuring, but they do physically block line of sight. And then there's the industrial vents, which are the big blocks, which actually...
Yeah.
Oh, there's actually these. These are the industrial vents, aren't they? Or are they the...
Huge!
Or are they the big things, the big square things? Because I don't...
No, I'm pretty sure it's those, because those are the ones that are in the pack before.
Yeah.
And on these maps, they're a very large rectangle shape.
Yeah. So let's have a look.
And those things are massive. Now, bear in mind that is the whole thing that's 30 centimeters long, so a foot long, by, call that 9 inches or so wide, well, 8 inches wide.
Yeah.
That whole thing
don't think
counts as area terrain.
I don't think these are a foot long.
They are.
30 centimeters. My apologies.
Yeah.
So these are the craters. Obviously, they look like craters. They look like vents. It's just I thought the other big square blocks were then. My apologies. So
no, you're good.
Yeah. So
they're the same width as the buildings, but they're 1.5 times as long.
Yeah. True. So this is the mission 1, round 1, mission 12, Scorched Earth. So it's obviously 6 objectives, which are listed on screen anyway. It's Dawn of War. Now, what's interesting is there isn't no big L in your deployment zone. If it is, it's got big holes in it because it's the new one.
Scorched Earth.
Yeah.
The most terrible mission.
You don't like Scorched Earth?
I don't think anyone likes Scorched Earth. I think everyone likes Scorched Earth out.
Why? What's wrong with it?
Have you ever seen anyone take the secondary objective from this mission?
No, so what's the problem?
I suppose. Okay, yeah, I suppose. It is 6 objectives. Hold 1, hold 2, hold more.
Yeah, so standard take and hold. So the terrain is quite well spread out, but the big L's, the big line of sight blockers are just outside the deployment zone.
That's right.
The small 3-inch ones are in the center, and then the non-line of sight blocking L's are actually on the deployment line, but they only block line of sight if you benefit from obscuring,
Yes.
It's quite an interesting layout because you've got the extra small L's in the middle as well. It feels really low in the middle, except for the big blocks. There's 2 big blocks, and then everything else feels really low in this map.
I'd love to have seen almost a sort of 45-degree angle on look at the table. because I think I'd see a lot more with that camera angle on it.
Yeah.
But effectively, you've got a couple of places where you can get light cover, so +1 to your armor save. If you're touching the big L, if you're touching the small L, and if you're stood on the gargantuan bit of difficult ground
in the
area
corners.
terrain that you've got over there.
Yeah.
And that's going to absolutely naff up your movement. So I wouldn't suggest anyone spends a lot of time balancing their army around that.
No.
But there's not a humongous lot of places to hide. If you're tall, or you have fly, there's almost no terrain.
Like I said, because all these four L shapes, 1, 2, 3, 4, are all 3 inches high. They're like this high, you know. So if you've got anything that's like a whirlwind can probably see over these, you know.
Absolutely. Even a razorback can actually see just over those.
Yeah, thanks for the follow.
You don't have to be massive. At all.
And they don't have obscuring because they're not tall enough, so you can just see straight over them.
The big L's. I've seen someone in chat say it's solid, so it blocks line of sight. You know, you're safe. But the thing is, if you're stood in one of the new small bits of ruin, and you walk, if you're in the red deployment zone and you walk right, you'll see straight into it. Yeah, it's almost as if it's not there. Yeah. So that's what. Yes, it puts you a little bit out of the way, but it actually doesn't really, because it puts you on the way to contesting that objective on the right-hand side in the center of the battlefield. So it still gives you good board position, and you see all the way into your opponent's deployment zone. Yeah. Someone just said Drakari are going to love this. Drakari having a field day on this. Venoms will be able to hide in these L's because of how tall they are, but like if you got anything like a Raider, only if they've got no flags on. Yeah, if you got flags on, that's it. You've had it. But like Raiders won't be able to hide in them because they're too small. The Raiders are stuffed. Yeah, I think if I remember rightly, you can't quite fit a repulsor into one. If I remember, because that's the last time I actually played on it. The repulsors are tall enough they see over. No, I don't think. I think they do with like the bits on top. I don't think like the physical tank. Oh, actually no. So that repulsor executioner, my apologies, the one with the turret. Yeah. But yeah, a repulsor probably does fit. But it's just quite interesting because, again, it just feels low in the middle. You'd think you'd have the big L's in the middle, especially on this deployment, and have the smaller L's in your deployment zone. Well, that's probably what I'd have done. Is I'd have literally the corners of the buildings are. I'd have swapped the big L's for the little L's. Yeah, and then I'd put the smaller L's in the deployment zones. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because you could have the new ones in the middle, like near these right and left objectives in the center. And then the big ones in the center, and then the little ones in the deployment. Interesting, though. Interesting. But that's only missed round 1, so well done. You progressed to round 2. Let's have a look at round 2. Round 2 looks a bit better, in my opinion. Looks more balanced, you know? So this is mission 11. Yes. To a point, though, again. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to find a perfect map, you know? No. Mission 11. I'm looking at the wrong mission. Retrieval mission. Not the other one. Yeah, it's retrieval mission. This one. So in this one, you've got the big L shape that's protecting your deployment zone in a good way. I think they're in a good position. These big squares. You've got the perforated ruin in the middle of your deployment zone near an objective, which is great because if you're small, you can hide behind it, which is fine. You got the small L towards the center, or to one side, which is nice. And then the little L's in the middle near objective. So I think this board's actually better. It's just the difficult terrain just doesn't do anything. You know? No, it's so far out of the way. Yeah, I think that's the same problem on the other one as well. Maps that we've looked at, that they've given you things like, look, if you really need +1 to your save, you stand here out in the middle of nowhere, but it will just mess you up. Yeah. And if you don't need it, then you don't stand on it. It takes no part in the game. Yeah, exactly. It just seems odd. It's not ideal. Yeah. But the other thing about this map is, let's say I'm player A in the sort of dark teal, and I have, say, a Devastator squad full of las cannons. Well, I can stand in that ruin, and then in my turn, I just walk upstairs. Yeah. And there's only a small angle of my opponent's deployment zone that I can't see with every single member of that unit. Oh, you think if you like stood in this top corner, so as you can see all the way down there? I just had to click on your map and realise that's the Twitch stream. You can shoot across there. Because this big L is actually getting away quite well. The old small ruins, not the new one, the old one. So in the bottom. Oh, you mean here?
Okay,
from
so you
there,
can see straight
I
out.
think you can see
Yes.
quite a lot.
Very good, because this is only 3 inches high. You can see over this
so
one, because that's
there's
also
two in the
3
middle
inches high.
and nothing.
And then this one has got holes in it, so you might be able to see through it, depending what it is.
No, they don't have holes in it.
This one in the enemy deployment zone.
Sorry, your mouse is like slightly behind on my view. I should stop looking at the bloody screen.
My apologies. Yeah,
That's
so you'll be able
alright.
to see quite a lot from the deployment zone, which isn't very good. But I think this map is better than the previous one, though.
Also, out of all of the LGT stuff that you bought in that first pack, there's two things that they could have just added to these tabletops and made a massive bit of difference, which is the hills.
Yeah, which is what I thought these big squares were.
Nowhere to be seen on these. Yeah, they're not hills because their little blurb says industrial vents.
Yeah,
Players
so
use the rules
these
for Kratos and a rule book. So
yeah, so these big
can't be
rectangles
there.
are these. It's confusing because that's not a rectangle, but the other piece of terrain that they're not using is this scaffold
and
thing.
it is awesome.
This scaffold thing, which is great because it blocks line of sight. You can hide from it.
Yeah. It's 6 inches high at the middle, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the best things about that set of hills is that middle platform there sits perfectly and fits 100% perfectly underneath the small buildings that they use. So you can take a small building
and double it,
raise the ground level up. It becomes 5 inches tall, suddenly becomes obscuring.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a base that's enormous.
Yeah.
It's actually a good bit of terrain used that way.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So they've taken away one of the things that physically blocks the most line of sight, second only to the massive L-shaped things, to give you a flat piece of difficult ground.
So let's go for round 3. We are talking about mission 33. Mission 33, which is priority targets. This is the one where it's taken hold. You get to move some objectives around. You get to choose one. You move one. I move one. And that's it.
Yeah.
So this is the map for it. So you've got 2 big fat L corners in the middle. Good place for them, in my opinion. You've got the big, humongous craters on the deployment line, which is again a good place for them, I think, because it's interactive in that position.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of chance that you'd move your opponents. Like if I'm player B, I want to take objective A in the bottom left and stick that on top of that terrain, so it's out in the open, not behind that terrain. So it actually has an impact on the game. They're going to be stood there where they have less movement. And they're wide open. Makes a difference.
Yeah, exactly. So what's interesting is how big this gap between the L in the deployment zone, the new L, and the area terrain. How close is that? Because
it looks to be about 2 inches.
You'd hope so, maybe, but without knowing, without physically having it to lay it out, I'd be very interested to see how close that is. They'll be almost touching, maybe. That's not a huge gap, you know what I mean? That's 15 inches between those. I'm not going to do the maths on this.
See that very light coloured grid that the map is on?
Yeah.
Each one of those lines is an inch.
Yeah. But are these to scale, these buildings? The buildings are to scale on the thing. So that gap is 2 inches wide. Excellent.
It's actually an inch wide from the base on the new L to the bit of area terrain. There's an inch, give or take, half inch or so between those two.
So you can't even get a space marine down this gap without touching one of them. Interesting.
But if you touch a little, that makes no difference. Touch the big thing, that does make it.
So you can't exist. You can't move. You'd have to go in, then move out, right? I guess. I don't know. You'd have to,
depends on what your objective is to get to and so on.
You can't move out of that ruin on the side without losing 2 inches to difficult terrain.
Yeah,
because you have to end in there because you're big enough. Because you're too big, sorry. Which is interesting. I'm surprised they're so close.
But at least it has an impact. What's really weird is actually the one in player B's deployment zone is slightly closer.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for the follow. So again, I think except for that strange gap, I think this is a lot better deployment layout of terrain. Sorry.
Yeah. I do too.
Yeah.
There's that
Hey,
nice
Max.
thing across the middle of the table. You're in deployment zones where your vision across the table is blocked very heavily by those two, by the large obscuring, well, by the small obscuring L in the other deployment zone, and the small one that you've got there just fills a nice gap. So unless you're running an army like mine, where everything's
Huge.
minimum about 5 inches tall, you're going to be okay to hide a fair amount of stuff here. This is the best map that I've seen so far.
Yeah, it's good.
And the fact you can move the objectives to get them into places where the rest of the terrain becomes interactive with that. For me, this is absolutely my number one so far.
Okay, mission 13, round 4. Mission 13 is... Let's go. Who's going to make it? Vital Intelligence. Look at this absolute mess of my my book where I've just wrote on all the objective measurements. It's the best way to do it. Do this, gamers.
Yeah, exactly. Don't measure this like weird down the line. Just no.
Right then, let's have a look at this one. So we've got, this is one, it's got 4 big objectives across the middle. We have the area terrain in the corners, which will interact, kinda.
Yeah. You can stand on it to get cover while you're holding it. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. The big L's are in the middle, which is great.
Haphazardly place the terrain again as well. Got a little building at the top and the bottom. This is the table after someone's had a game where it's just been knocked a little.
Because it's straight and everything else is like slanted. Brilliant. So it's interesting, this one. Again, you've got the big L's in the middle, the perforated L's in the middle of your deployment, which might be good. Especially because these are going to be blocking most of the board anyway, because again, they are so big. And then you've got the small L's to hide in your deployment zone, and then these ones just kind of a bit drunk.
Yes, ever so slightly. But it's another relatively solid setup. There is somewhere to hide. You know, as long as you can take advantage of the obscuring keyword. There are some physically obscuring bits of terrain. And because of the placement of the 2 large L's, depending on where you're coming at, if you're coming in from player B's deployment zone along the bottom and out through the gap between the 2 small L's, that isn't going to make a humongous difference when it comes to lines of sight. So that bit being obscuring, that's fine. And if you go the other way around it, sure, it does, but then you're countering the obscuration on the lefternmost, the more upper.
Yeah, exactly. So it's way more open, but obviously, it's going to be. You've both got it. So this one's interesting. I think it's decent.
Yeah, that's my number 2.
Yeah. Okay, we've got 3 more to go. So mission 32.
No, last one actually. So it's a 7-round event, but the last 2 rounds, so round 6 and round 7, are a 4-player knockout tournament, taking the highest scoring 4 players into that. So most of us are only going to play 5 games out of a 7-round event.
Yeah. Don't forget to lick, compliment, and subside. Excellent, that's some dads. Excellent. Don't forget, gamers, like the stream. Lick the stream. Lick it right now. So this is mission Sweep and Clear, which is corner deployment. We have the big area terrain in the center of the board, inside and outside of deployment, like that. The big L's near the center, like that. The new L's covering your right or left side, your right side, from the opponent's deployment zone from their area terrain, like that. And then some little L's all around. This is actually a good table. It's a good table, I think.
It is. The great big pieces of area terrain are actually in a clever position here, because despite the fact it doesn't look like they have much impact, it actually really will. If you are on either of the non-center objective markers, basically, as long as it's not the center when you're talking about, it's any of the others, you will be able to deny your opponent a pretty decent deep strike range, which will put them onto that. Now, admittedly, a lot of stuff that Deep Strikes has the fly keyword, things like Sandguard, we're looking at you. And therefore, it will ignore the difficult terrain part of that. But not everything does. So there'll be a lot of stuff that Deep Strike's in. It's like, well, you've got to make an 11-inch charge now. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, because you're going to be landing on this, for example, on this big block. But I think the deployment layout for this one's really good because again, you've got lots of nice places you can hide or be just in cover.
Yeah.
And again, the area terrain's interactive because of where it is, because you're so close to 2 objectives and it's in your deployment zone. But also where you are, you can be quite easily countered because there's 2 big L shapes, the new L's, which if they've got holes in or can be stood on top of, you can see straight into there. Whilst they're still getting cover, you can still see them. So there's not many places to hide while being sat there. And as you say, yeah, if you drop into one of these L's, you can hide really well from the rest of the game, essentially, these 4 L's. And then just hold an objective and deny deep strike locations. And then if you do deep strike, you're going to be landing probably in area terrain, which will make you -2 to charge. That's your death guard. Finally.
Yeah. And they're okay. For them, it's fine. With the taller, smaller L shapes,
the middle ones,
to really confuse things, the middle ones.
Yeah. They're actually in the middle of the board.
There is a single level 10 centimeters high. So there'll be 10 centimeters is 4 inches essentially. So 4 inches high in there's a little place you can stand above ground.
Yeah.
So you'll have lines of sight if you stood on that over every piece of terrain that isn't the 2 big L's.
Yeah, true.
Making the rest of the small ruins even more useless.
And it's going to be a great place to stand as well because of the fact that you can't deep strike within 9 horizontally. Doesn't matter what level you're on. So you create massive anti-deep strike zones, which is great. Yeah. So again, good table, I think. Be interesting to see it in person,
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like, I don't know about you, but every time I go to a tournament, I look at the tables and seeing the table in front of me, I can start to decode where I can put units. I can start to decode arc fire and things like that. I find it a little harder looking at maps like this.
Yeah.
The Alliance Open do a great terrain map where they not only put down the objectives themselves, but they show you the arcs of fire you get around terrain and stuff. And that gives you so much information. It's almost too much. Whereas this is sort of half of that, I guess. And it's nice to have it. And I think that this terrain pack, aside from the fact that I don't love the whole of the ruins keywords coming to play on the big stuff,
I just don't think it needs. I don't think it needs it.
Okay.
Yeah, I just didn't think it needed obscuring on the big blocks when it's so massive.
They're enormous.
Yeah. Again, just a reminder for those at home, which ruin we're talking about. We're talking about this bad boy, which is this big. It's 20 centimeters. So this base, it has obscuring, so you can't see from here to here if you're less than 18
a way
wounds.
to look at that is just imagine that whole thing was a magic box that size.
Yeah. 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters by 20. Humongous.
Big old box.
That's a big box.
However, that being said, the pack, aside from the dice controversy, which I'm not a humongous fan of, I think it's overall a good pack.
It's a good pack. The terrain, I think it'll probably be better to see it in person before we, lambast it. But I think overall it's quite good compared to what it was, especially compared to what it was.
Yeah.